Hey guys, we're going to talk about multiplicity. So multiplicity simply means multiple zeros. So the definition here at the top, the multiplicity of a zero is equal to the number of times its corresponding linear factor occurs. So when you see an equation and you want to know what the multiplicity is, first you have to factor it and find the zeros. So for the example that we have here, to factor this, we would have, first our greatest common factor would be x. And if you factor out an x, you're going to be left with x squared minus 6x plus 9. And then I would want to go ahead and factor that further. So I'm going to have x and x minus 3 and x minus 3. Alright, so as you can see, if you have this, then that implies that we have x times x minus 3 squared. So those two things are the same, just written in a different way. Okay, I like the second way better because the exponent there helps you determine the multiplicity. Okay, so again, the multiplicity of a zero is equal to the number of times its corresponding linear factor occurs. So this one occurs twice. If I had written this down 3 times, then I would have a 3 here. It would be 3. So what are the zeros? The zeros, remember, you set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So you set x equal to 0. That's just 0. And that occurs 1 time. So we're going to have multiplicity of 1. And then we have x minus 3. If we set that equal to 0 and solve, we'd have to add 3 to both sides. So we have x equals 3. And that occurs twice. So multiplicity of 2. So again, multiplicity is basically how many times the zeros occur. Hopefully that's not too bad. All right, how we're going to determine multiplicity on a graph. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit so we can look at another example. All right, how multiplicity affects a graph. First, you would want to sketch that graph. So if you go to your calculator, is probably the easiest way. Type this in. This is the same one, so you're going to have your factors. You know you're going to have an x at 0. You know you're going to have where it crosses at 3. And again, that comes from the one above it. We've already factored it and looked at that. So, if you check, you find a couple other zeros, you're going to see that you have a point here and at 2, 2. And then you just kind of, you know, it has opposite in behavior. We have another point up here. If I can get it on here correctly. Graph's not going to look very good. I apologize for that. You probably want to sketch this in your calculator and look at it. I'm not very good with using these online tools. All right, so opposite in behavior. We know that the zeros go with your factors, and those become your x-intercepts. So if the multiplicity is odd, then the graph crosses. You can see it's odd. This was a 1. That was where x equals 0. Then this crosses well, it crosses at the 0. Okay, so if it crosses at the 0, it has an odd multiplicity. If the multiplicity is even, remember the other one had a power of 2, so it was x minus 3. We solved that and got x equals 3, so it has a 0 at 3, but that was multiplicity of 2. 2 is an even number, so if it's an even number, it's going to turn at the 0. Okay, so if it asks what happens with the multiplicity, you're basically going to say it either crosses at the 0 or it turns at the 0. And again, I'm hoping you're looking at your calculator. The picture that I sketched is not the best picture. All right, moving on. Example 6 is kind of like some of the homework problems. So if we look at this, this will give you an idea of how to do some of those problems for homework. So if we look at x plus 7 squared, if we want to know what the 0 is, we set that equal to 0 and solve. So your 0 will be negative 7. Again, your multiplicity comes from how many times that occurs. This is your linear factor. It occurs 2 times because it's got an exponent of 2. So your multiplicity is 2. And then the effect comes from the multiplicity. So the effect, if it's even, remember, it turns. And if the multiplicity, that's supposed to say turns. Let me try to do a little better. All right, and then we would move on to the next one. So the next factor is 2x plus 1, okay? 2x plus 1 equals 0. Again, you would just solve that for x, so subtract 1. And divide by 2. So your x is going to equal negative 1/2. So that's your 0. That's where it crosses the x-axis. That's your x-intercept, also known as your 0. The multiplicity is how many times it occurs. If you look up here, there's no exponent. If there's no exponent, it's assumed to be a 1. Okay? 1. If it's odd, 1 is odd, then the effect is it crosses the graph. Okay? The last factor, x minus 4, if we set that equal to 0, your 0 is 4. Okay? It has an exponent of 3, so the multiplicity is 3. 3 is odd, so it crosses the graph. It crosses the x-axis. Okay? I hope this is helpful. Number 7 is the same, except you have to factor it first. If you want to try another example, feel free to do so. All right, good luck with multiplicities.